You're listening to Idea Charger Radio. Hey there, Success Chargers. Welcome back to episode number 18. Hey, you've probably noticed that we're taking a short break from some of the recent interviews that we've been doing lately, and that's because we're cooking up some really good stuff. If you've been following Idea Charger online, or if you've been following us on Periscope, you probably have seen a few of these interviews maybe that are coming up for the podcast, that you could see the full unedited version of those as they are recorded live. That's typically where we will record a lot of those. And in the process, we're creating some video content that we will soon be posting up to our YouTube page. So be looking forward to that. There's some good stuff coming up. So as we think about last week, I challenged you to really let go of your past, think about what it is you want in the future, and set your plan in motion with the basic 3 steps of reset, reload, and rock out as we look forward to next year. And one of the things that came up a lot when we did our recent survey about what you wanted to hear about on the show was effective use of time. And as you know, I live in Houston, Texas, and it can be a bit of a burden to get into town because I live out in the suburbs, and to get into town and get where you want to be, I mean, it may be a pretty good haul. I mean, you could be talking 50, 60, 80-mile round trip just to get into a meeting and back out. That can be a couple hours in the car, depending on what time of the day that you go, and it can just really be difficult. But I wanted to share a story, true story, that happened just a few years ago to me here in Houston, and it made me really want to sort of adopt a new policy, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I first shared this on one of my older websites at Cooksey Connects as a blog post, but I wanted to share it again with you today because I went back and was reminded by my good friend Patrick Almond at stopdoingnothing.com. He started recently reposting links to some of my old posts, my old blogs, and I sent him a message and said, man, I really appreciate you picking those up. Haven't thought about some of those ideas in a while, and his response to me was, good ideas are timeless. So with that spirit, thank you, Patrick. I wanted to make sure that I went back and maybe adapted some of the past messages that you may or may not have read and bring them back to life here. So this story kind of goes back to a event that happened here in Houston, as I mentioned, about 2 years ago. And it was really a meeting that I had been invited to. But before we get into the details of that, let me just ask you this. How many of you, quick show of hands, right? Because we're audio and I can't see you anyway, but raise your hand, roll down the window, stick it out while you're on your commute, wave at somebody next to you and say, I'm tired of people that waste my time. Give them a thumbs up and keep driving. Now, don't do that. In this town, you might actually get shot, so we don't want that to happen. But let's agree with this. Each week, hundreds, thousands, let's go as far as to say millions of meetings just might likely occur around the globe each and every week. And my question to you is, how in the world do you know which one of those will be a good use of your time? And how do you know that you're choosing the right ones to attend? So here it is, my 5-step plan for how to choose meetings you should attend. That's pretty timely, wouldn't you say? All right, number 1, is it a required meeting? All right, so maybe it's a standing appointment. You may still choose to pass on showing up from time to time, but weekly sales meetings, weekly team meetings, they can be a good example of this. A well-run organization should appreciate that if you're not in that meeting, it may be because you're on an actual call with a customer or prospect, and if so, that's a good thing. But if the meeting perhaps only happens quarterly, or more importantly, annually, like your annual review, you probably want to show up for that one. Or if you are the manager, you probably want to show up to offer that review to your people too. Or perhaps it's a special project, something you're heading up, an initiative that you're driving the boat on. That one you probably should be considered to be required to attend, because after all, you did call the meeting, which is number 2. Did you call the meeting? Yeah, we just answered that one. But a few examples in the world are more disrespectful than the one person who did not show up prepared is the very person who called it. And if you think about it, you've probably seen many examples of this. So if you call a meeting, you better show up with a game plan. Have an agenda. Ideally, you would have shared at least the outline of that with your attendees before they got there. If you have a lot of analytical-minded people, folks that like to think things through, and you want to move forward with some good quality ideas, it might have been helpful if you had leaked some additional data or information to them ahead of time with the prompt that, hey, when we get to the meeting, I'll be looking for your input. Here's some information that's relevant you might review before we get there. It's not a bad call to really do that for everybody. Some of your action-oriented people may say, you know what, I like the direction you're going. You don't need my input, rock and roll, and you'll get what you want. So if you really need their opinion, tell them they need there, but let's agree on this. You will show up. You will be prepared. People know to expect that from you, and that if you respectfully cancel the meeting, do that with plenty of lead time so you're not just scaring them at the last minute. But if it turns out you don't need the meeting, by all means, right up until the time it's supposed to start, you are welcome to cancel it anyway, because on the other hand, some people would just appreciate to have that hour back if it's all there. Question number 3, or point number 3, filter number 3, if you will, is the topic relevant to you? So take a look at the information that the presenter is putting together and decide if that topic of that meeting is relevant enough for you to attend. If it's about one of your current projects, you probably want to be there. If it regards your immediate responsibilities or something you have a general interest in or a focused interest in, you might want to be there. All right, you should take time. If it's relevant, go. If it's not, you might check in with the person and see if it's okay if you sort of sat that one out. Hey, maybe they want your input. Maybe they need a unique perspective. If it's not convenient for you to go at all, then that's a good opportunity for you to engage in a good pre-discussion with them. You might be able to give them some feedback they're looking for, some input, and still be present, even though physically you aren't actually in the meeting. So if it's not relevant to you, maybe you don't need to go, but you better pay attention to who actually called the meeting, because that it may quickly become relevant to you, even though you thought it wasn't. Does that make sense? Am I talking in circles? All right. Point number 4. Who else did you expect to be there? One of the best ways to get in front of a client, a prospect, or an influential person is just to sort of happen to bump into them at a meeting and learn that you happen to have a shared interest in a particular topic. See, one of my most fun meetings occurred around a Saturday morning 28-mile bike ride. Nobody else showed up except for me and the director of an economic development team. We showed up to ride bicycles, but in the point of being there, and in fact, I didn't even know him before we got there, but we learned a lot about each other's business, and I really found out that he is the economic development director over a very interesting and exciting part of town here in Houston that's really growing. And we had a wonderful conversation, doing something we enjoy to do, having fun on our hobby, out on a really chilly, windy day, enjoying a beautiful ride up to Huntsville, Texas. Had a wonderful time, and it sort of looked like an accident, but I'm telling you, that's a great way to build your network, is to go find people that have a shared interest other than the interest you may have in trying to sell them something. Got that? Something outside of business could be a good way to meet some people. Finally, the last thing to keep in mind, and I sort of alluded to this one as well earlier, is geography. If you live in a large metropolitan area, just across town might actually mean half the day. I mean, you've got to pack a sandwich, maybe a change of clothes, fill up the tank full of gas, risk getting caught in some crunching traffic jam, at least one way of the two. Look, I have a rule. If there's a 60-minute meeting that requires me to drive across town, I won't go unless I have another meeting somewhere in the area. And if I have 2 or more meetings or can generate 2 or more stops en route to and from in the general vicinity of, if I can work it in that way, I'll go. Otherwise, I'll look for an alternative. Could we meet by phone, Skype, FaceTime? Is there some other method? Could we just email back and forth some ideas? From time to time, it is valuable. From time to time, I do need to go into town for that one meeting and sit down face to face. I mean, hey, if somebody's talking to me about coming in to work with their team and they're considering my proposal, then by all means, I'm going to go in and sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and see what's going on. But take geography into account, because while you may have a meeting that seems important, there may be an alternative way to hold that meeting or a smarter time to do that So you're not wasting your time just for the sake of going to a meeting. Which brings us to the story. So again, this was a couple of years ago, and there was a group that met in town fairly regularly. The gentleman that puts the group together, it's a fine group, had been after me, really wanting me to get more involved with the group, and I was still kind of on the fence. I wasn't sure if it really met all of my criteria to be able to come in, if that's all I had going on that day, to make it to the meeting. But, you know, they, with much fanfare, a lot of announcement, they had really hyped this particular meeting with a gentleman who was coming to speak, who was credentialed as, quote, America's #1 expert on sales. Okay, that should be your first clue that something was about to go horribly wrong. Nobody's the #1 expert on sales, period. End of story. Anybody that claims to be is absolutely wrong. Okay? Nobody's the #1 expert on sales. Nobody's the #1 expert on a whole lot of subjects. All right? Are there people that are really good? Yes. Are some better than others? Absolutely. And I think you get what you pay for. This was a free lunch at a restaurant, which, you know what? Let's add what's the culinary connection in your criteria if you go to the meeting. This particular meeting was at a sushi restaurant that had actually a pretty decent value for lunch and a decent sushi. So, hey, if you like the food and you want to go. All right, that's fine. So you can add that. But in any case, look, this guy was scheduled to be there at the meeting, and I noticed that the meeting, the gentleman that puts this group together, he was really vamping, and he was kind of filling in, and he was asking people to tell other stories, and he kept getting text messages from the speaker saying, "Oh yeah, I'm almost there, not quite there." Well, he finally did get there 10 minutes before the meeting was over. Now, to the credit of Jeff, the guy who was running the meeting, to Jeff's credit, he said, "Look, I'm glad that you're here. Glad you finally made it. I have promised everybody in the room, though, that the meeting would be over by 1 o'clock or whatever the ending time was." He said, "And by my watch, that means you have about 10 minutes to talk to the group, but we're certainly willing to have you do that. But, everybody may stand up and leave in 10 minutes because we've already been here for an hour and a half." And at that point, the guy who was the speaker stood up and didn't even acknowledge the fact that he was an hour late. In fact, when he was kind of sitting there and the meeting organizer was sort of making that awkward transition to try to get him ready to come on the stage, I actually watched the speaker quite rudely give some instructions to the wait staff at the restaurant and sort of make some demands that I thought were completely out of line. And this is somebody who, look, I understand as a professional speaker, I'm somebody that sometimes you need to be a little bit more direct and very clear in what you need in order to carry on, particularly when you're in a restaurant or a hotel and you're working with a staff that may not know. But this was a guy that was simply trying to order a cup of coffee, and he was really crappy about it. Not going to lie. He was really crappy. So my radar was already going off saying, I'm not sure I'm going to stay. Not sure I made the right choice today. So keep in mind, he's got 10 minutes. So he stood up. And he then said in his opening statement, and I'm telling you folks, he built this up as the #1 cardinal rule of speaking. This is my rule #1. The one thing, if you don't do anything else, you should do this. You ready for it? He spent 30% of his time, 3 of the 10 minutes he had left to speak. And this is what he said. And I quote, "It's extremely important to arrive early at every speaking engagement to build a connection with your audience." I'll give you a second to pick yourself up off the floor. Yes! What a hack! This guy shows up an hour and a half late for a meeting that he is the key presenter, that we have promoted, the group has promoted him, pushed I don't know how many reminders out about the meeting to try to draw him a crowd to get him there so that he could, and ultimately, look, I knew what he was going to do. He had an upcoming event. He was kind of given a teaser, a little something, and get find out what he's about. And if you kind of like it and you want a little more, you had your taste, come back, come to my event. He no more got that statement out of his mouth. And I slowly and quietly, respectfully, began to gather up my things. In my book, he didn't even have 10 minutes. He'd blown it in the first 10 seconds. I stood up, nodded to the meeting facilitator and walked to the door because the damage had already been done. Look, things happen. I get it. I've been there. When you are someone who travels a lot, you may run into issues that you didn't expect from a travel perspective, in your car, in an airplane, something you get held up at the hotel, any number of things that could really get in the way of you being where you need to be at an allotted time. But ladies and gentlemen, there is no excuse for coming in egregiously late and not even acknowledging it with your audience, and instead going right into what is very clearly a canned pitch that has been given time and time again without respect for who's sitting in the audience. He lost the opportunity to make a connection with me when he falsely claimed that the most important thing was to show up in order to build a connection. There's no excuse for that. So as you think back to last week and you're looking at how you want to reset, maybe something like this has happened to you in the past. You just made a huge misstep. I really hope that this gentleman learned something from this and chose to hit the reset button and has handled future situations where that may have occurred, hopefully because they were out of his control, that he made a choice to at least acknowledge the elephant in the room and do a better job talking to his audience. If not, that's pretty sad for his part. Maybe you've made some mistakes of your own. I encourage you, learn from those. Let's move on. I agree. The number one rule is show up and build some rapport. Be early. I go a lot of places. I'm in hundreds of places a year where I show up at places in cities I've never been, states I've never been to. Look, a lot of times I always fly in the night before, and I will often drive by and get eyes on the facility that I'm going to in the morning before I go back to turn in at the hotel the night before. This guy, I don't know where he was coming from. Maybe he did legitimately get held up somewhere. But to show up and completely disrespect the group of people that were waiting on him, I think is inexcusable. But I'm going to say, let's hit the reset button. What I want you to do then next, if you've made a mistake, figure out what you could do better next time. How would you have handled that? What if you had stepped in the room? Give some serious thought. In fact, I'd love to hear what you're going to do differently, having heard this story. Send me an email, send me a message, send me something at podcast@ideacharger.com. Let me hear from you and see what's going on. I originally shared this story as a blog post a couple of years back on one of my other websites, and got some great responses, not the least of which was that people said, gee, Scott, I never knew that I could really set some ground rules for myself as to whether or not I choose to go to a meeting. And I think that's fantastic. I was certainly glad to hear that some people had that. I had some other people that responded and said, you know what, I've fallen into bad habits because they're acceptable to the other people that I'm around. And I'm realizing that that's not who I am authentically. And I'm going to go back to showing up on time and showing up even early, even for meetings that I'm not the scheduled speaker. I'm going to be there. And then finally, my favorite one perhaps was the young lady that responded with, perhaps you should have just shown up wearing a t-shirt that said, I don't really care about you, but give me your money. I thought that was pretty clever. So listen, you've got a great year ahead of you wherever you are in the process. Let's not get caught up in what's happened for you in the past. Let's look at how you can leverage what's happened to you to get more of what you want as you head into the new year. So as you think about the questions that might come to your mind, you've got some responses to what we've talked about here. I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note at podcast@ideacharger.com. You can also follow the show online at IdeaCharger. That's on Twitter. And if you want to get to know me a little better personally, see a little bit more of than just the business stuff, but some of my other interests, sometimes I get into that too, over at Cooksey Connects. That's COOKSEYCONNECTS. Cooksey Connects. That's also on Twitter. You'll find me there. And be watching for us on blab.im. Blab's a cool platform that you probably heard us use a while back. You can see the interview that I did with Darren LaCroix and the one I did with Jimmy Monk. And we've got some other ones that are coming up. Perhaps maybe even by the time this this episode gets released, there may be a couple more that are out there. You should be able to find those at Blab, and we'll be soon moving those to a new YouTube channel, which will get set up here pretty soon. So that's coming the way here in the next few weeks as we get going. So I hope you're enjoying what's going on. And hey, listen, as you're looking at your tail end of your budget here too, if you've got some money that in your budget this year that's a use it or lose it money, let me just kind of let you know how we could work together. You can certainly stop by at ideacharger.com/services and take a look. If you'd like to get some one-on-one coaching with me, if you'd like to have me come in and work with your team, your group, a project that you've got, you just want to put your down payment down this year and pay the rest of it out next year, let me know how we could work together because my calendar is starting to fill up and I don't want to miss the opportunity to work with you because it's you and companies and organizations like yours that are absolutely the folks that I want to be working with. And a lot of you think that, oh, he doesn't want to work with me because my company's too small. Contrary, I would like to bring you the ideas that I've seen work in all sized companies, large and small. And I really get a kick out of coming into these companies with, 5 to 50 million in revenues and sitting down to talk about what you do, get up to 100 million in revenues and talk about what's happening. Those companies, believe it or not, in the world of business are considered small. But let me tell you, to me, and to those of you that are in those businesses, they're pretty big stuff. And I really appreciate what you guys are doing because you're the lifeblood of what's happening right here. So if we could work together, I'd love the chance to do that. Certainly have some topics available at www.ideacharger.com. Let me know. And hey, just got the word this week that coming up in May of 2015, I'll be speaking at the 2015 Gulf Coast HR Symposium. It is an incredible, huge 3-day event that's here in Houston, Texas in May. It's put on by the HR Houston group. And boy, there's going to be some great stuff. So we'll have details about that coming up. I'm doing a traditional breakout session, and then I'm doing a really, really, really cool, kind of a one-of-a-kind, no PowerPoint, out of the ordinary session that's really going to be awesome. And we're fired up. And I think if this goes off like we think it will, we may just be taking this one on tour. And I'm really excited about what we're doing at this one. So be watching. We'll have some more coming up after the first of the year on that one. So hey, until next time, Success Chargers, remember, it's up to you to reset, reload, rock out. We'll see you next week. If you enjoyed what you just heard, please post your 5-star review and subscribe to Success Charger today. Your future